In the heart of Alabama, deep within the moss-draped woods, stood Elm Bluff Plantation, a decaying mansion that time itself seemed to have abandoned. Locals whispered that it was once a boarding house, owned by a peculiar widow named Margaret Wren, who took in strangers after the death of her husband in 1842. But what started as charity soon twisted into something monstrous. In 1846, travelers began disappearing on the road between Mobile and Montgomery. Drifters, soldiers, and widows, anyone desperate for food or shelter, were drawn to Elm Bluff by the promise of a warm meal and a bed. None ever left. Those who passed by claimed to hear faint singing at night, the sound of a family dinner echoing through the trees. Some said they saw pale figures standing in the upstairs windows, their faces wrong, too still, too similar, as if copied from one another. And always at the head of the table, a tall, skeletal woman with silver hair and an empty stare. The story began when Samuel Dyer, a wandering preacher, arrived one stormy night. His horse collapsed outside the estate gates, and through the sheets of rain, he saw a flicker of candlelight inside. Margaret opened the door herself, her voice trembling with false warmth. "Welcome home, dear. You're just in time for supper." From the moment he crossed the threshold, Samuel felt something heavy in the air. Not just the rot of old wood and mildew, but the smell of bodies that had been too long at rest. Every step deeper into that house felt like stepping into a memory that wasn't his. The portraits on the wall watched him, their faces unnaturally similar, all bearing the same cold gray eyes as Margaret. He didn't know it yet, but by morning, he wouldn't remember his own name. If you've made it this far, you're already trapped in the mystery of Elm Bluff. Hi, hello. Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there. And don't forget to subscribe, because this story... Samuel Dyer followed Margaret through the candlelit hallway, his wet boots echoing softly against the warped wooden floor. The air was thick. Every breath carried the faint odor of something burnt and sweet, like overcooked meat. Margaret's long black dress brushed the floor as she led him into a massive dining room where a table stretched almost the entire length of the hall. There were already people seated, 6 of them, their faces pale, their movements stiff. None looked up as Samuel entered. They simply sat there, spoons raised, staring blankly into their bowls. The flickering light made their skin appear waxy, like old dolls half melted by time. Margaret smiled thinly. "These are my children," she said, her voice trembling with unnatural affection. "They don't talk much, but they eat." Samuel forced a polite nod, uneasy as she pulled out a chair for him. The seat felt damp. When he glanced down, he noticed faint stains, dark, rusty, old. His throat went dry. Still, hunger made him accept the bowl placed before him. The stew was thick, with a strange metallic taste that lingered far too long on his tongue. He tried to speak, to ask where the others had come from, but Margaret shushed him softly. "No questions at the table, love. You'll upset the children." The room grew colder. Somewhere beyond the walls, a floorboard creaked, deliberate, slow, as if someone was crawling inside the walls themselves. Samuel's eyes darted to the far end of the table, where a figure sat half in shadow. A boy, maybe 16, with mismatched eyes and an oversized jaw. The boy smiled, teeth too many. Then Samuel noticed something else. The faces. Every child looked eerily similar to Margaret. Same gray eyes, same sharp cheekbones, same shape of lip. The night after the dinner, Samuel awoke in a narrow bed beneath a sagging ceiling. The rain had stopped, but the house still moaned, as though the wood itself breathed. He could not recall how he'd gotten to his room, only that Margaret's cold hand had brushed his face before everything went black. He sat up, head pounding, and noticed something strange. The door had no handle from the inside. The only light came from a small oil lamp that flickered each time he moved. On the bedside table lay a folded note, written in elegant script. "Don't wander. They don't like to be seen before breakfast." He ignored the warning. The hallway outside was darker than he expected, lined with closed doors, each marked with a small brass number, but not in sequence. 3 came after 7, 7 after 1. From behind one of them came a faint scraping sound, followed by a soft sob. A woman's voice, repeating the same phrase over and over. "Please, let me out. I'm her daughter now. I'm her daughter now." Samuel's pulse raced. He tried to force the door open, but it wouldn't budge. The sobbing stopped instantly, replaced by a quiet humming, the same song he'd heard at dinner. Further down the hall, he noticed one door slightly ajar. Inside was a nursery frozen in time. Cracked porcelain dolls lined the shelves, each one with human hair stitched into its scalp. In the corner stood a wooden crib. Inside it lay something wrapped in a child's blanket. When Samuel reached out to uncover it, he saw a face. A woman's face. Eyes sewn shut. Mouth stitched into a permanent smile. Behind him, a voice whispered, "She's still growing." Samuel spun around. The door slammed shut. The lamp flickered and died. When it lit again, Margaret stood in the corner of the room, her hands clasped like she was praying. "You shouldn't have opened that room, my dear," she said softly. "That one was mine before I was born." By dawn, Samuel was exhausted and pale, yet he couldn't escape the feeling of being watched. The hallway walls were lined with portraits. At first, ordinary paintings of Margaret's family. But the longer he stared, the more unnatural they became. Each canvas seemed to twitch ever so slightly, as if the eyes themselves followed him. He reached out to touch one, a portrait of a young girl with sunken cheeks and oversized forehead. The moment his fingers brushed the frame, her eyes blinked. A faint smile tugged at her lips, grotesque and crooked. Samuel stumbled back, heart hammering, but the portraits didn't stop. In each one, Margaret's face appeared subtly, sometimes on a child, sometimes as an adult lurking in the background. A silent signature of ownership. As he wandered the hall, he noticed cracks in the walls, revealing hidden passages. Shadows shifted within them, moving against the candlelight, always just out of reach. Occasionally a hand would emerge from a crack, pale, gaunt, and stiff, before vanishing back into the darkness. Samuel realized with horror that the family wasn't confined to the rooms. It inhabited the walls, watching and waiting. He stumbled into the main parlor, where a massive fireplace dominated the room. Above it hung the largest portrait he had ever seen. Margaret in her full glory, skeletal and radiant, sitting among dozens of children who were all pale duplicates of her. One by one, the painted eyes followed Samuel's every move. He could swear the mouths were whispering, "You are ours. You always were." A sudden sound made him spin. Footsteps descending the stairs, soft and deliberate. 6 figures emerged from the shadows, moving unnaturally, like puppets controlled by invisible strings. Their gray eyes were fixed on him. One of them, the boy with mismatched eyes, tilted his head, revealing teeth too many, and whispered, "You belong in the painting now." Samuel's stomach churned. That night, Samuel couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house felt like a drumbeat, counting down to something unspeakable. By midnight, he found himself drawn to the main hall once more. The candlelight flickered across the walls, revealing faces pressed against the windows, pale, gaunt, and unblinking. Margaret's children were assembling in a circle, their movements stiff, as if rehearsed for decades. At the center of the circle, Margaret herself knelt, her skeletal hands tracing symbols into the dusty, wooden floor. The symbols glowed faintly, almost imperceptible in the dim light. Her eyes reflected a strange fire, an unnatural hunger that made Samuel's skin crawl. He could feel the pull, a magnetic force dragging him closer. "You must join us," Margaret whispered, her voice low but commanding. "This is how a family is made, by choice and by force." One of the older children handed Samuel a small carved knife. He shook violently, backing away, but Margaret's gaze held him, rooted him to the spot. The other figures began to chant, their voices blending into a single, sinister hum. Suddenly, the room warped. Walls seemed to pulse, the air thickened, and shadows became solid shapes. Faces emerged from the floorboards, pale, disfigured, with twisted smiles, all identical to Margaret's. Samuel realized with horror that the ritual wasn't just symbolic, it was alive. Every soul captured here became a part of the house itself. Another brushstroke in Margaret's monstrous canvas. He tried to run, but the door had vanished. Every exit was gone. The chanting grew louder, more urgent, as the knife trembled in his hand. Margaret rose, her figure towering unnaturally, and extended her hand. When Samuel awoke, he was seated once again at the massive dining table. The candlelight flickered, revealing a scene that made his stomach twist with terror. Margaret's family was there. Dozens of pale figures, their faces eerily similar, all silently staring at him. On the table were bowls of the same dark, metallic stew he had tasted days before, yet it reeked stronger now. A scent of decay and something faintly human. Margaret herself sat at the head of the table, her skeletal fingers drumming on the wood. "It's time to eat," she said, but there was no warmth in her voice, only command. Samuel realized then that the house had trapped him in an endless cycle. No matter how he tried to escape, each morning ended with the same table, the same meal, the same pale watchers. Desperation clawed at him. He tried to speak, to demand answers, but the voices of the others were gone. Silence pressed in, thick and suffocating. Occasionally one of the children would twitch, an unnatural, jerky movement that made him flinch. One boy's jaw unhinged slightly, revealing too many teeth, as he whispered, "You'll join us soon." Samuel's memories of the outside world began to blur. Days, or perhaps hours, slipped together. The stew never emptied. The table never ended. Sometimes, he thought he saw new faces appear. Strangers who hadn't been there before, pale and gaunt, slowly being molded into Margaret's family. By the flickering candlelight, he noticed something horrifying. The portraits in the hallway were changing. Each face at the table mirrored the portraits perfectly, a reflection of reality bending to the house's twisted will. Every meal, every gesture, every bite drew him deeper into Elm Bluff, until he felt the house pulsing in time with his own heartbeat. And Samuel's resistance waned as days blurred into nights. The house itself seemed to breathe, walls contracting and expanding like a living organism. He no longer remembered how long he had been trapped, only that every heartbeat, every breath, tied him more tightly to Elm Bluff. One evening, as candlelight flickered across the warped floorboards, Margaret approached him with an eerie serenity. Her skeletal frame seemed taller, almost unnaturally elongated, her gray eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. "It's time," she whispered. "You belong to us now." Before he could react, the shadows surged, coiling around his limbs like living chains. The knife slipped from his grasp and clattered to the floor. Figures emerged from every corner, from behind portraits, from beneath floorboards, from the very walls themselves. Each face was a distorted echo of Margaret, eyes gleaming, lips twisted into eternal, unnatural smiles. Samuel felt his body being pulled apart and remade. Pain seared through him as his limbs grew stiff, his skin paling, his features twisting into a grotesque mimicry of Margaret's children. His mind fought against the change, screaming, pleading, but it was futile. Elm Bluff consumed him entirely, body, soul, and will, weaving him into its tapestry of horror. Finally, everything went still. The table was set for another dinner, but Samuel was no longer seated. Instead, he hung in the portraits along the walls, one more pale, expressionless face in a gallery of horrors. Visitors who came seeking shelter would see him staring from the frames, his gray eyes following them, a silent warning of the fate that awaited anyone who crossed the threshold. And Margaret? She remained at the head of the table, skeletal yet eternal, her smile widening ever so slightly. Each child was now another captured soul, forever part of her family, a testament to her monstro, his power. Elm Bluff had claimed yet another,